Reading from Empress Orchid by Anchee Min, starting in chapter 3. Now, I usually don't do this when I'm just doing a reading and discussion, but trigger warning. If you've ever read any of these stories, especially ones about the imperial harem, ancient China, there are some things that happen that may be disturbing to some readers and viewers. There's nothing particularly graphic that's going to be read, but it could make you uncomfortable, and this is definitely not for young ears. So that's the nicest way I can say it without you actually hearing the words printed on the page. But I do believe for stories to have an impact, they must be told in truth. Even fiction and the truth of how things happened are important for us to understand the story, respect the setting, and gain empathy and compassion for the characters being presented to us. So that being said, let's get into it. I was walking among the thousands of girls selected from all over the country. After the first round of inspections, the number dwindled to 200. I had been among the lucky ones and was now competing to become one of Emperor Xian Feng's 7 wives. A month before, the household committee had sent me for a physical examination. The process would have shocked me if I hadn't been preparing myself. It took place on the south side of Peking in a palace surrounded by a large formal garden. The house and grounds had once been used as a vacation palace for emperors. There was a small pond in the middle of the courtyard. I met many girls whose beauty I didn't have words to even begin to describe. Each maiden was one of a kind. The girls from the southern provinces were slender, had swan-like necks, long limbs, and small breasts. The girls from the north were like ripe fruit. They had breasts like gourds and pumpkin-sized buttocks. The eunuchs checked our birth signs, star charts, height, weight, the shape of our hands, our feet, our hair. They counted our teeth. Everything had to match the emperor's own charts. We were instructed to undress and line up. One by one, we were examined by a head eunuch who had an assistant recording his words in a book. Uneven eyebrows, the head eunuch pronounced as he walked past us. Crooked shoulders, a laborer's hands, earlobes too small, jaw too narrow, lips too thin, puffy eyelids, square toes, legs too short, thighs too fat. Those girls were instantly dismissed. Hours later, we were guided to a hall with a peach flower patterned curtain. A group of eunuchs came holding tapes. My body was measured by 3 eunuchs. I was pinched and squeezed. There was no place to hide. Shrink or stick out your head. Either way, you won't escape the dropping axe. The head eunuch pushed at my shoulders and yelled, "Straighten up." I closed my eyes and tried to convince myself that the eunuchs were not men. When I opened my eyes again, I found this to be true. In the countryside, men drooled at the sight of an attractive girl, even when she was fully clothed. Here, the eunuchs acted as if my nakedness made no difference. I wondered if they were truly unfeeling or simply pretending to be. After being measured, we were taken to a bigger hall and ordered to walk. The girls who were marked down as lacking grace were dismissed. Those who passed waited for the next test. By evening, there were still girls waiting outside to be examined. Finally, I was instructed to put my clothes back on and sent home. Early the next morning, I was brought back to the mansion. Most of the girls I had met the day before were gone. The survivors were regrouped. We were instructed to recite our name, age, and place of birth, and our father's name in a clear voice. The girls who sounded too loud or too soft were dismissed. Before breakfast, we were guided to the back of the palace where several tents were set up in an open garden area. Inside each tent were tables made of bamboo. When I entered, the eunuchs told me to lie down on one of the tables. 4 senior court ladies appeared. Their painted faces were expressionless. They stuck out their noses and began to smell me all over. They went from my hair to my ears, from my nose to my mouth, from my armpits to my private parts. They checked between my fingers and toes. One lady dipped her middle finger in an oil jar and stuck it inside my rear end. It hurt, but I tried not to make any noise. When the lady pulled her finger out, all the other ladies jumped to smell it. The last month went back in an eye blink. Tomorrow, His Majesty shall decide my fate, I told my mother. Without saying a word, she went to light incense sticks and knelt down before a picture of Buddha on the wall. "What's on your mind, Orchid?" Wrong asked. "My dream of visiting the Forbidden City will come true," I replied, thinking of Big Sister Fan's words. A glimpse of such beauty makes one feel that one's life has been worthy. I will never be an ordinary person again. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. I hope you like this other backdrop that I have. I still have 3 other walls in here that I can use for different things. But I thought that sitting in my pink chair with my things behind me might be a good spot to sit and read novels such as this. Because this is a deep one. We started reading Empress Orchid and The Last Empress, which is the companion book to this, both written by Anchee Min before the holidays started. Then holidays hit and, you know, I holidayed up like everybody else, changed up my content a little bit, but now I'm getting back into this one because it's such a great story. And, you know, if you've watched my channel for long, you know that I have this weird obsession with, you know, the ancient Chinese court, the Forbidden City, the whole concubine system. I just find it utterly fascinating because it's so different from how I've been socialized in the world. This opening in chapter 3, whew, a lot happened. So, why don't we talk about it? I warned you. I told you at the beginning it was going to be a thing and there was going to be some uncomfortable language. Now, levels of comfort and discomfort when it comes to literature definitely varies person to person. I have always been someone, and it could be because I English and theater major, but even as a youngster, being someone who has always read a lot, I've been exposed to a lot of writing, and I understand very well that to feel the story, to care for your protagonist, to want to follow the events, even in fiction, realism has to be there. And what I find so fascinating about these stories is that it's completely outside of my own world experience, which is why I'm so drawn to them. Probably the same thing with the Space Marines. I don't know. You know, I do read a lot of stories that come out of Black America. Absolutely. I have read my Langston Hughes and know it well. You know, I know my James Weldon Johnson and have most of his sermons committed to memory. You know, but those are stories that are close to home for me. So it's hard to examine them objectively without getting so passionate because of my own experience, which is why I choose these stories that are outside of myself, because then I can look at them objectively. Because if one is going to talk about literature, if we're going to talk about printed work that stays, this is still literature. It's animated literature, but still literature. You must talk about it within the context in which it exists. And if you're part of the context, that's kind of hard to do because then you have bias, and everyone has bias. There's nothing wrong with bias. You just have to know it exists. What is bias? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Let's talk about it. Bias is the lens through which you see the world. This is trainer self coming out. Sorry, can't help it. But bias is the lens through which you see the world. Take my glasses, for instance. I've given this example before. These glasses were made for my eyeballs. An examination was performed. My family history was taken. And the optometrist determined that this is the prescription that will help me see the world the best. This is literally the lens through which I see the world. The only way you could see the world the way I see it would be to have my eyes and these lenses. And nobody has that. We only each have the lenses that we were born with, the lenses of our experiences, our families, our socioeconomic position that we were born into, the education we did or did not receive, and so many other factors. And that gives us a bias. And it's not wrong and it's not bad. One just must recognize that one has a bias and to not let that bias affect what we investigate, what we enjoy, and the opportunities that we seek in the world to enjoy this thing we call humanity and the space we occupy on the planet. So I choose to examine these stories because I know what my bias is when it comes to stories that directly affect me as a Black American woman. And I can't go there because I'm going to go too far. And that's not entertaining. But with these stories, I can take a step back and go, oh, okay. I'm seeing the world through the eyes of women who lived much differently than me. And it helps me also realize how our differences, even though they seem so vast, they were so much alike throughout history. And that gives me greater comfort that humans are more alike than we are different. And we just take a moment to step back and openly, with open eyes, open hearts, open minds, examine where one another's coming from, we might learn something. And there's a lot in here to learn. So let's start with the uncomfortable bits. So our central character, Orchid, who will eventually be the Empress Yihonala, which that is the clan that she hails from. They will change her name when she goes into the palace to her clan name versus her given name. And if you don't know what a given name is, that's your first name in most cultures. But she has to go through an examination process. Becoming a wife or concubine of an emperor is a big deal. Which is one of those things that from the outside seems like the greatest thing ever. Like, I don't know about you, but me and my girlfriends, we just spent, Christmas break and New Year's break watching The Crown. Which is the closest thing I can compare things to in modern times. But from the outside, when you watch The Crown or you examine the British royal family, from the outside, it looks like the life. It looks like it's great. And then you start peeling back the layers. And you realize that the majority of them are in a gilded cage. Granted, that cage is a Rolls Royce. I mean, money can't buy happiness, but I sure would like to cry in a mansion. But they are in gilded cages. I think one of the most horrifying things that one of me and my friends discussed as we were watching The Crown, especially when they got to the portion where William and Kate met, Prince William and Princess Kate, who are now the Duke and Duchess of, what are they now? Wales? Yeah, Wales. The Prince of Wales and Princess of Wales, because he's next in line to inherit the throne. Was after their marriage, they were at one of their private palaces. And this wasn't in The Crown. This is just something that we discussed while we were watching it. They were at one of their private palaces, way behind the gates, way off the road. And Princess Kate was sunbathing, which is totally allowed. Who doesn't go on vacation to a private place and sunbathe? You know what? You're allowed to sunbathe in your birthday suit, especially in private property or in a place where that's allowed. Those things exist. And some reporter flew a drone and took a picture of her, and it was published. I remember when that happened. And we talked about it, and I said, man, I don't think I could trade the level of anonymity and privacy that comes with being a regular citizen for that. That nothing about you would be sacred because you're literally public property. I mean, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, you know, politics not being part of the conversation, to be royal is to be public property. You are born public property. And there are two ways to get into a royal family. You are by the blood, meaning you were born into the family, or you married someone who's in the family. Where Europe and China and a lot of Asian dynasties differ is in the number of allowed wives and concubine. Historically in Europe, there's one legitimate wife. One. Now, you know, affairs happen. We all know about them. I mean, Prince Charles done married his affair. You know, but that's a whole other conversation for another day. As to why, you know, speculation as to whether he should have just been allowed to marry her in the first place and none of this awful business would have happened. I don't know. Wasn't there, wasn't born when all that went down. But we all know that the monarchs of Europe, even though they were in monogamous, on paper, Christian marriages, they've been dropping extra children throughout history. Like, they're everywhere. You know, it's like over here in America. It's like, how do you know that the presidents had relations with their slaves? Jefferson is not an African name. Washington's not an African name. That's how we know. Okay, so where I do have a bit of respect, even though it's not my culture and I can't see myself being a part of it, where I got some respect for cultures of concubine and multiple wives, is those women are freely acknowledged. They're not a secret. They're not a dirty secret. They're not just fulfilling some desire behind closed doors that no one knows they exist. Any woman that the emperor takes on as a wife or concubine or a fling, if she pops out a baby, especially a son, she's golden at that point. She has made it, you know, and that could happen to literally any girl in the kingdom. And he doesn't hide his women. He might have 700 of them, but they're all known. And they're all, at least physically, I can't say emotionally and mentally, but physically they're taken care of. And that's a distinct difference when you're thinking about the different types of monarchy. I don't know as much about South American monarchies, the different tribal groups and whatnot and kingdoms that were established. I studied a lot of them in my medieval history class, but I didn't understand their social structures. I don't really talk about it and delve into that literature much. I don't like to talk about things I don't understand, you know, because it doesn't come across as authentic. But I will give the Chinese dynasties that, whether one agrees with it or not, they acknowledged all of the women. You know, that, yep, I had relations with her and we made a baby. It's not a secret. You know, while over in Europe, they're like, no, I'm being true to my spouse. It's totally okay. And, you know, you got all these little Windsor bastards running around everywhere. Okay, that was too far. My bad. Coming into the palace as a potential bride for the emperor is a privilege and the greatest terror of a girl's life. Because, one, if she is able to pass all the tests and become one of those chosen brides, one of those chosen concubines, it will change the fate of her family forever. Because it's not just about her. It's about what it does for her family. And as we remember, way back, I'm going to learn how to put them links to other videos at some point. I don't know how to do that yet. Haven't examined it. I'll figure it out. But going back in the playlist under Book Nerd. We understand that her family has come upon hard times. And Orchid happens to be a beautiful girl. A beautiful girl with unbound feet because she is from a clan that didn't do that. So not only is she beautiful, available, the right age, she has a unique feature in that nobody broke her feet in half when she was 4. So that makes her different than all of the other girls that will be presented. She was raised freer than most girls at that time. And there are tests to pass, because any woman who's going to enter the bedchamber of the emperor could potentially produce the heir to the throne. Because remember, they don't do succession the way that European countries do it, you know, father to son, or now in Europe, in England, I know that before Elizabeth died, they changed it to where it could pass to if the firstborn was a daughter, it could go to her, because, I mean, come on, Queen Elizabeth. So it's a little bit different. It's not direct lineage. It's who the emperor picks out of his sons. Now, some emperors are unlucky. and only have one son. So there's no other choice. And potentially some brothers and uncles could be fighting it out for the throne if that happens. But the reason the emperor has so many women is to have the maximum amount of chances to produce with this combination of perfectly chosen women with their matching star signs and bright set of teeth and butts that smell good to produce the perfect heir. The more women he lays down with, the more babies he has, the more likely some combination is going to produce the next son of heaven. That's the whole reason he has so many women. And at least they're all legitimately acknowledged publicly. That is such a huge difference that I cannot downplay at all. But it's a humiliating process. I wouldn't go through that. I'd done hide. Like if I heard that the king was out looking for brides and, you know, I had to go let some strangers smell me and I'm a be under a park bench somewhere, under a porch, you know, hiding in a barn to make sure it wasn't me. Because in this period in history, when the emperor was looking for brides, basically every eligible girl from a worthy family had to send their daughters for examination. And it's kind of like, you know, the American Idol, you know, tryouts. You know, it starts out with this many, and then this many, and then this many, and this many, and they narrow it down. You go regional and provincial, then local, then to the final test. And it's humiliating because you're going to be public property. It is, I feel like those tests weren't even set up for, I mean, I know that the whole, you know, are they a virgin? Are they clean? Do they have perfect skin? Yeah, it is about that. But I think a big part of it was teaching those girls, and they were girls, they're all teenagers, okay? We're talking 14 to 18, to be clear. They're teaching them their place. That even if you make it to be one of the 7 wives of this emperor, if you make it to concubine status, heck, even if you produce a son, you're still a woman. You're still property. Know your role and shut your mouth. The eunuchs are another enigma. Do you know what a eunuch is? Men, plug your ears. You don't want to hear this. They done took his stuff. So that he cannot produce children with any of the court women. Men were definitely needed in the halls of the Forbidden City, the palace, to serve the emperor and to serve his wives. There are some things that require a man's strength. There are some things, you know, that men and women do think differently, whether you think so or not, they do, where they might want a dude doing this versus a woman, that, you know, just reasons. Or for theater and art, if you wanted to perform with one of the ladies, it couldn't be, you know, a dude, or to carry the one. They couldn't have men running around who had the ability to reproduce around the royal harem, because the royal harem is the most beautiful women in the country. Lots of temptation. So if you want to work in the palace behind the gates, choppy with your most precious assets. That is the nicest way I can say that. And no disrespect, you know, the eunuchs that are judging these girls, they're going to be the ones to also care for them one day. They will maybe be their most loyal confidants. They might betray them one day in all their secrets, depending on how far they do or don't rise in the royal hierarchy. And the ones who are the head eunuchs, they have worked hard to get those positions. Head eunuchs can even be given ceremonial wives, you know, maids of the palace or that type of thing. Women who are never going to be able to have children because, you know, they got a eunuch for a husband. But because this eunuch has served the emperor so well, he can at least look at her. You know, they might even be allowed to adopt a child together. Like the head eunuch is a big position. And they through the examination process, they are letting these girls know, I'm over you. You're not, don't get it twisted what this relationship is. I work for the emperor and your property. And then the court ladies come in to examine the women. You have to understand, they're naked for this whole process. I mean, they're really letting them know, you are nothing. You're going to be real lucky to get picked. Even if I have to bow to you one day, you'll remember this. So other ladies who have served either other emperors, they have husbands in the court, whatever, they are court ladies. After the eunuchs approve an examination, the court ladies come in. And just like with foot binding, they do to these girls what was done to them, the most demeaning, degrading, humiliating practice. Because, well, this is a hazing. And if I had to go through this to get in, so do you. These are the rules of the court. You aren't skipping it. And there is so much that happens generation to generation in many cultures that if those who suffered the indignity before would simply put a stop to it, the next generation wouldn't have to suffer it. But there is this mindset of, well, if I had to suffer, you had to suffer. It's kind of like in America. I would liken it to older generations thinking, well, I had to work hard and suffer, so do you. Like, I don't see the point in making people suffer just because I had to. I thought the whole point in generations getting better was so the next generation wouldn't have to have it as awful. If you raise good people who know how to be good citizens, everyone's life doesn't have to get harder. We can collectively make everyone's life better. But, you know, that's not always the case in how people react. So they put these girls through, again, because they were put through. And this is how they decide who is going to potentially be the mother of the next emperor, because that's going to be one of these young ladies. They're going to give birth to the next emperor. And you got to remember the titles. The titles are so important. The emperor is called the Son of Heaven. You can't grow up being called the Son of Heaven and not have an ego the size of the Superdome. Okay? Like that. And we're going to get to him later. And apologies if I don't pronounce Chinese names perfectly. I do my best. My Japanese is pretty decent. My Spanish is really good. I have trouble sometimes with Chinese pronunciation, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it. What an interesting way to step into the world. But Orchid, her mother prepared her for this because Orchid doesn't come from an impoverished family. Although they fell on hard times when her father died, her father was a regional prefect. He was somebody. So she would have been trained to understand that one day she might be a potential bride to the emperor. And her mother did her job and schooled her on what was to come. And the girls who were schooled and trained well, they're the ones who make it through. Because they're the ones who know to take a bath every day for a week for 5 hours before they show up so they smell as good as possible. They're the ones who know to stay out of the sun so their skin is as beautiful as possible. To comb their hair 1,000 times a day so that it is as silky as possible. And to understand that they're going to have a happen. And to just grit your teeth and bear it, because that's part of the process. She was prepared. But just like the royals of modern times, she's being prepared to be a bird in a gilded cage. From the outside, Orchid even says it herself, remembering what one of her relatives said to her, is that a glimpse of such beauty, talking about the Forbidden City, makes one feel that one's life has been worthy. From the outside, the Forbidden City looks like a goal. Every family that produces a daughter, a useless branch for another family. Hopes that their daughter will be beautiful enough, talented enough, good enough to become an imperial bride or concubine. They'll take concubine. But it's a gilded cage. It's a beautiful prison. Yes, it comes with privilege. Yes, it comes with guaranteed status, an uplift for the family. But for that family to be raised, this one person must be lowered. While they might potentially be the mother of an emperor themselves, the mother of the nation, they're still property. These are young ladies who are going to live behind the gates for the rest of their lives, never to be seen by another non-eunuch man other than the emperor, because they are property. And she knows that. Orchid knows that that's her fate if she enters the palace. And she says it herself after completing the process. I will never be an ordinary person again. No, you won't. So let's pick up. My mother stayed up all night. Before I went to bed, she explained the meaning of Yuan in Taoism. It was about how I should follow my destiny and alter it like a river moving among the rocks. I listened quietly and promised that I would remember the importance of being obedient and learning how to swallow the spit of others when necessary. I had been ordered to be at the gate of Zenith before dawn. Mother had spent her last borrowed towels and hired a sedan chair to carry me. It was draped with fancy blue silk cloth. Mother had also hired 3 plain-looking sedan chairs for Kuei Sang, Rong, and herself. They were to accompany me to the gate. The footmen would be at the door before the rooster's first cry. I didn't fuss about the way Mother spent the money. I understood that she wanted to send me off in an honorable manner. At 3 in the morning, Mother woke me. My being chosen as an imperial consort had filled her with hope and energy. She tried to hold back her tears as she did my face. I kept my eyes tightly closed. If I opened them, I knew that my tears would flow and ruin the carefully applied makeup. When my sister and brother woke up, I was in Big Sister Fan's beautiful dress. Mother tied up the laces. After all was set, we ate porridge for breakfast. Rong gave me 2 walnuts that she had saved from last year. She insisted that I eat them both for good luck. I did as she wished. When my footmen arrived, Rong helped me to keep the dress off the ground until the footmen lifted me into the sedan chair. Kuei Sang was in our father's clothes. I told him he looked like a bannerman, except that he must learn to do the buttons properly. The girls and their families gathered at the gate of Zenith. I sat inside the sedan chair. It was cold. My fingers and toes grew stiff. The gate looked imposing against the dark purple sky. There were 99 copper-colored cups embedded in the gate, like turtles parked on a giant panel. These covered the huge bolts that held the wood together. A footman told my mother that the wall-thick gate had been built in 1420. It was made of the hardest wood. Above the gate, on top of the wall, was a stone turret. Dawn broke. A company of imperial guards poured out of the gate. They were followed by a group of eunuchs dressed in robes. One of the eunuchs took out a book and began to call out names in a high-pitched voice. He was a tall, middle-aged man with the features of a monkey, a pair of round eyes and a flat nose, an ear-to-ear, thin-lipped mouth, and a wide space between his nose and upper lip. His forehead sloped. He sang the syllables as he made the calls. The tune lingered on the last note for at least 3 beats. The footman told us that he was the chief eunuch. His name was Shem. The eunuchs dispensed silver coins in a yellow box to each family after a name was called. 500 taels from His Majesty, the Emperor. Chief Eunuch Shem's voice rang again. Mother broke down when my name was called. Time to part. Orchid, watch your step. I got out of the sedan chair carefully. Mother almost dropped the box given to her. She was escorted back into her sedan chair by the guards and was told to go home. Consider yourself boarding a ship of mercy on the sea of suffering. My mother cried, waving at me. Your father's spirit will be with you. I bit my lip and nodded. I told myself to be happy, because with the 500 taels, my family would be able to survive. Take care of Mother, I said to Rong and Kuei Sang. Rong waved and raised a handkerchief to her mouth. Kuei Sang stood like a wooden post. Wait, Orchid. Wait a while. I took a deep breath and turned toward the rose-colored gate. The sun popped out of the clouds as I made my way to the Forbidden City. "The Imperial ladies walking," Chief Eunuch Shim sang. The guards at the entrance lined up on either side, creating an aisle through which we passed. I looked back for the last time. The crowd was bathed in the light of the sun. Rong was swinging her arms with a handkerchief. Kuei Sang held a box of tails over his head. Mother was nowhere to be seen. She must have been hiding inside of her sedan chair crying. Goodbye. My tears fell freely as the gate of Zenith slammed shut. Can you imagine being Orchid? To stand in front of the most imposing of circumstances, knowing that the sacrifice of her life and freedom will save her family. And that's why she's doing it. She's not doing it for China. She's not doing it because she's in love with the Emperor. Not now, anyway. She's not even doing it for personal gain of being a chosen, pampered lady. She's giving up everything she is and has for the sake of her widowed mother, her brother, and her sister, so that they don't have to live in poverty, because she was pretty enough and unique enough to be chosen as a concubine. Next time we get into the story of Empress Orchid, Empress Ihonala, we will read from the other book, The Last Empress, which is, again, the companion book to this one. Such a good story. Highly recommend. This was one that when I picked it up, I'll be honest, I picked it up based on the cover. This is the edge that was sticking out of the bookstore, and just skimming to see if something would appeal to me. I went, ooh, that looks like a picture of something I want to read, and it was. I highly recommend it. I read this one in a day, just like I read Lady Tan's A Circle of Women in a day. There are just some books that are just like you got to. Once you start, you can't put them down. When I pick up Minka Lesk, the opening to that was just, it's insane. So I want to have time to do the first book in the omnibus when I finally do find time to pick it up and read. Life is so busy, but it's good to have lots of things to keep your time occupied. But definitely pick this one up, give it a read. You will enjoy it, and if you don't, well, it's not expensive. So that's fine. So as usual, if you made it this far, thank you. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.